Hi everyone, this is your producer Peter Finger. Before we jump into today's show, I want to share an exciting opportunity with you. The Triad Summit Series happening online on February 20th. This free event brings together top experts in the field, and attendees will also have a chance to earn CE credits. This year's lineup features an outstanding group of experts including Amy Pickett-Williams from the Light Movement, Lindsay Bonham from Money Nuts and Bolts, Bronwyn Schweigerdt from Angry at the Right Things podcast, and returning speakers Dr. Laura Ignacio and our very own Dr. Graham Taylor. They'll be covering essential topics for mental health professionals such as healing from grief, financial skills for therapists, managing and understanding anger, and self-meaning-based therapy for couples. Don't miss this opportunity to learn, grow, and connect with leading experts in the field. Register for free at triadhq.com/TSS. That's triadhq.com/TSS. We look forward to seeing you there. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor, and joining me today is a return guest, Bronwyn Schweigerdt. Bronwyn is a licensed psychotherapist, public speaker, author, and host of the podcast Angry at the Right Things. Known for her evocative therapeutic approach, Bronwyn specializes in helping clients externalize and process deeply buried emotions such as anger and rage. She believes that these intense feelings, while validated and articulated, are crucial for overcoming mental health challenges like depression, anxiety, and psychosis. By fostering a healthy relationship with anger, she empowers individuals to establish boundaries, enhance self-trust, and break free from dysfunctional patterns. Her belief that sharing trauma with a compassionate listener makes it bearable underpins her work, aiming to transform isolation into healing and connection. Well, we're excited to have Bronwyn back with us today to discuss healthy anger management, combined with addressing one's personal shame, and how leaning into these can provide significant benefits to one's life and relationships. Bronwyn, welcome back to our show.
Thank you, Graham. I'm happy to be here.
It's nice to have you back. Bronwyn, when we reference, recognizing and dealing with anger within ourselves, most of us, tend to want to avoid it. We tend to find anger challenging and feel and tolerate, let alone express it in a productive, generative manner. And on top of that, there are a number of psychological and social and cultural factors that make the healthy expression of anger difficult. And we also know the cost of poorly managed anger that leads to a variety of negative outcomes, both for the individual and their relationships. And then we can even add the expression of anger, the idea of looking at the shame one may be carrying. This is all pretty vulnerable, but this is exactly what you're advocating, bringing anger and shame together, leaning to deeper healing. But I just want to kind of highlight this piece, when we talk about adding to the expression of anger, the idea of looking at shame that one may be carrying, this is all pretty vulnerable for one to do. But that's exactly what you're advocating here for, Bronwyn, is to bring anger and shame together to lead to deeper healing.
It is really vulnerable. And it's almost like, when something's kind of sequestered away, it's hidden out of sight because it feels too vulnerable. Well, that's the very thing that is going to keep tripping you up if you don't address it. And so, we want to move toward those feelings and say, why are they there? What are these all about? And how can I learn how to, with anger, it's learning how to channel it out in healthy ways. And then with shame, how can I unlearn this shame? Because anger is an emotion. And I view emotions as something that want us to elicit motion. They want us to move forward. They want to teach us to move and do something that is productive. But shame is not an emotion. It's a feeling, but not an emotion, meaning it is not native to humans. Babies are not born into the world with shame like they are with anger and all the other emotions. Yeah. It's not native to humans, but it is socially, constructed. And shame doesn't want to move us. It wants to debilitate us. It wants to make us stuck.
Yeah. So this idea of bringing these together, there's that saying that you can't heal it till you feel it. And we want to avoid these things that are harder to feel. As we start out, operationalize for us, if you would, these constructs of anger and shame. What are we talking about with those two?
Yeah. So anger, I view as just a light on the dashboard of our emotional car
Hmm.
telling us, hey, something is off, check under the hood. And the goal, the objective is to bring resolution and repair to a problem. So anger, of course, it can produce volatility and it can hurt people, but it also hurts people when we don't channel it in healthy ways. And we can learn to master the anger by saying, what's this all about? Why am I feeling angry? And I can channel the anger out of my body in healthy ways, like asserting myself, having assertive speech with someone, or creating a boundary with someone, or accountability. So that's the emotional part, the wanting to move forward that anger wants us to do. Shame, again, doesn't want us to do anything. It wants us to get stuck. And how shame is also different and not productive, like anger can and should be productive, really, is we dissociate from shame. Like humans dissociate from feelings of shame. So we don't even know what's going on. We just know we're not able to really take in what's happening because we're dissociating.
When we talk about shame and dissociating from it, what are we dissociating from?
The feeling of shame that is being triggered. So anger oftentimes is a trigger, but sometimes it's not a trigger. But shame is usually a trigger of like an early imprinting experience of feeling shame usually by a primary attachment figure.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, oftentimes we talk about guilt and shame in our work. And what we often recognize is that we feel like, well, they're kind of the same thing, and they're not. Shame is really, I found, and I'm thinking, I'm hearing you say the same thing, is that shame is kind of who I identify myself as. This is who I am.
Yes.
And it's not what I did, it's who I am fundamentally.
Yes.
And it's a much more embodying kind of in our fabric kind of sense of ourselves, isn't it?
It is all encompassing. And the other thing with shame is anger has a reason to be there. It is trying to communicate something very, very vital to give us wisdom. But shame is the opposite. And it is a distortion. It is a lie because humans can engage in behaviors that are shameful, but humans are not shameful. We are not our behavior. So we might be like, man, I really regret saying or doing that. But that doesn't mean we are shameful inherently. So it is a lie versus other emotions that are there to give us wisdom moving forward.
That's right. That's right. Do you find that there's a difference between men and women in the experience of anger and the experience of shame?
Yes. So I believe, and I made a short podcast episode about how shame in men and how it differs from shame in women. So I believe in Western society, we condition little boys not to cry. And we don't have that same reaction to little girls. Girls are allowed to cry and therefore be vulnerable, show vulnerability. But girls aren't really allowed to get angry. And so what I find with my clients, most of whom are women, when they're angry, they cry, but they're angry tears. But that was the only acceptable way for them as children to show anger was by crying, because it looks like they're just sad and it's not threatening for the parent. But boys are conditioned not to be vulnerable and cry, but they're okay to be angry. And so what happens with boys, I believe, when they're shamed for crying as a child, that creates this template within them that they're not allowed to be vulnerable ever at all, because that all is equated with being rejected or shamed by another person. And so I believe so many men, in marriage, for example, when their wife is trying to communicate how their feelings are hurt by something the man says or does, they can't hear the wife. They can't really hear. All they hear is, you suck. That's all they hear. And that is the distortion that shame creates. That shame is getting in the way of them hearing what the wife is really saying, because they're dissociating from it, because that shame is being triggered. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And that's exactly what makes communication at times so very hard. And that's what I think leads to the idea that there's toxic masculinity or toxic anger. And when there's the absence of being able to acknowledge and embrace, what you're saying is simply an indicator on one's dashboard of feelings that's identifying something that we get to take a look at and process and talk about and express in a healthy way. If that's never done, and that's rejected somehow, and there's a shame then attached to this. The big shame is about who I am. Every time I'm feeling something strong, I'm going to be shamed for that. And it's a really sad kind of cycle here, isn't it? That we experience and a shame that gets to be carried very unnecessarily and in a very interfering way in one's life and in one's interpersonal life.
Yeah, because when the wife is saying, honey, when you say this or do this, it hurts. He can't hear. Because what she's not saying, you're all bad. She's saying, I love you, but this particular thing is bad. And he's going to a place of, that's bad, so I'm all bad. And that's what shame does. It creates these distortions, these delusional constructs, right? So that's a big problem. And that's an example of where shame shows up so often.
That's really good. You're talking about the cost of shame and anger not being well understood and well managed. It really creates these delusional constructs, these interpersonal barriers to intimacy and one's own. I like what you said earlier, and I really believe this to be true. This is who we are, is our inherent self here. But shame becomes this shroud, this lie, this belief that we have that we believe to be true, but it's not. But we act as though, live as though, respond as though, interpret things as so, this is who I am, and it's not. But it's the accumulation of all of these past experiences, messages, other things that occur in our lives that create that self-meaning, just like you're saying. I want to jump in as a clinician, you as the clinician, and how you help folks understand this, the way you're helping us understand it now, some exercises you may do and things that you bring to awareness to help folks move past this and into a more intimate relationship, both with themselves and maybe with others.
I am coming to realize, I just went to the dentist the other day, and he is so funny. He was so proud that he was able to find the decay because, he doesn't have a 3D X-ray machine. And so he said, I knew it was there, but it was really hidden away and I didn't know where it was because the X-rays are just 2-dimensional. And so he was showing me the before and after he removed the decay. And he was so proud of it. I joked, I said, you need to frame that and hang it on your wall. You're so proud.
Right.
But I was thinking, when I looked at the before and after, when I saw that decay on the before, and then I saw that really white, beautiful, glowing tooth, but much smaller tooth after, I thought, wow, that decay is death. And it was hidden. It was actually hidden under the gum line. That was why he was so proud that he found it. And I thought, that's what a good dentist does, is they are a decay finder and remover. And that's what a good therapist does, is they're a shame finder and a shame remover, because shame is a type of decay. It's a type of death that will, if left to remain, if it is not rooted out, it will cause further death and decay and destruction. And I just kind of see it now as really the antithesis of what I do as a therapist and what we need to be doing. It's everything, because shame is the residue from our childhood trauma. And I mean trauma in the most broadest sense. Whenever we experienced something that was like a rejection or neglect or emotional abandonment or actual abandonment, abuse or whatnot of a primary caregiver, or abuse of kids at school, bullying, whatnot. But the outcome is shame. That's the commonality between all those things is
Mm.
shame. That's the residue. That's the part that like sticks and doesn't remove. And that's the decay that eats away at us. And it can even be from something seemingly really innocuous, like a parent's look on their face of disgust at us when we're playing with a bug. And little Graham doesn't have, as a child, we don't have the discernment to distinguish between, oh, that look of disgust on my mom's face isn't disgust at me, it's disgust at my playing with this bug, right? And so he takes in, oh, I'm disgusting to my mom. Or it could be something as innocuous as there being another child born. And let's say we're 3 years old and mom is, neglecting us for a time because a newborn, that's what happens. But as a 3-year-old, all we can see is, oh, we've lost mom. We are defective in some way. We're not worthy like this new baby is. And so that's why I do these integration exercises with my clients. That's what we're setting right, is we're bringing that adult objectivity and that discernment that brings the truth to those imprinting memories. And so that sounds like, it might be hard to find an imprinting memory, but can I tell you like how I find them?
I would love to hear that, please.
Okay. So our adult triggers, our current triggers will take us right back to those imprinting memories. So that they're not hard to find. So I'll give you an example from my own life. So, my biggest source of shame, one of my biggest sources of shame was my just feeling very neglected by my mom. And so today, and I know that because today, when I'm talking with my husband and we're sitting down and I'm talking and he looks away while I'm talking, I am very much triggered. And so, like, let's say an hour later, I'm just like reflecting back on it. So I'm being my own therapist at this juncture, but I'm reflecting back on that. And I'll close my eyes and I'll imagine he's looking away while I'm talking. And I'll feel in my body whatever I feel. And that's the shame. So usually people feel shame in their gut. That's like a big place where it shows up. They'll feel like a pit or a knot in their gut or tension. But they'll also, a lot of times, will feel it on their shoulders. It'll feel like something is pressing down, something's heavy on their shoulders. So anyway, let's say I feel the shame in my gut. And so now I'll just close my eyes, focus on that sensation, and then let my mind just drift back passively to the first time I remember ever feeling that same sensation. And that will take us right back to an imprinting memory.
When you do that, you're finding that trauma, and when we think about trauma, and you said it earlier too, we always think about the 9/11s. We think about the car accidents. We think about the extreme ones that are just really hard to miss. But we can maybe even frame trauma as, those events outside the realm of normal experience where, like you're saying, I come home and I bring a bug and I get a look of disgust. Well, the disgust is not about the bug. The disgust is really about me.
Yeah.
And that's the shame piece that I hold, and that gets imprinted. And so when I'm an adult now at this age, and I had that same kind of trigger, like a piano chord that reverberates back to the origin, the epicenter of that memory, I can go back to that memory that's been imprinted. I can hold the shame, find out maybe where I carried in my body, my shoulders, maybe my gut, maybe my heart, because I'm sad, whatever it may be that was imprinted very early on. Then what do I do?
Yeah. So that was me doing my own therapy. So let's say I'm working with you, Graham. Let's say you're my client. Let's say your imprint, like that memory for you is, your mom's look of disgust.
So let's say I come home. Let's say I come home and I'm about 9 years old, and I've got a new basketball move that I learned on the playground that day.
Yeah.
And I walk into the kitchen. And my mom's had a 12-hour day, and she's cooking dinner for the rest of the family. She said, "I can't look at this right now. I know you got a new basketball move. That's good. I can't do it. I'm just too tired. So go talk to your dad." So I go in the living room. My dad's in there reading the newspaper. He had a 14-hour day, and he says, I'm just too tired. I can't watch this. And let's say that happens, a fair amount of time, because my folks are hard workers and I know they love me, got a roof over my head, pay for things. And I know I'm loved, but for some reason, I feel like maybe I'm not interesting. Maybe I don't matter because they can't give me the attention. And it's subtle and it's nuanced, but I walk away believing that I guess I'm just not that important. So I don't bring that things anymore. Or when I try and share things on my adult life now and I say, hey, can I share something that happened at work today? And someone says, yeah, well, wait just a minute. I get triggered right back to, I don't matter enough because you're not stopping what you're doing in this moment, to put that down, to say, hey, I would love to hear it. Tell me.
Yes, yes,
That's my
yes.
shame.
Okay, so let's say you're my client and we go back to 9-year-old Graham, who is so excited and wants to show this new move, and he's not getting to share that and he feels like he doesn't matter. So I would have you close your eyes and picture 9-year-old Graham.
Yes.
And then I'd have adult Graham now enter into that memory, and he would get down on eye level with little Graham, and he would look him in the eyes and he would say, little Graham, I get that you feel like you aren't enough. I get that you feel like you're lacking in some way, that you don't matter. And that makes complete sense why you feel that way. But I want you to know now what I know. Let me share that with you. Little Graham, I need you to see that the reason mom didn't stop what she was doing was 100% a mom problem and 0% a little Graham problem. I need you to see that her inability to show interest in you is 100% a reflection of her and 0% a reflection of your worth or value. And little Graham, I want you to know that I'm here now. I'm here and I'm going to be that attachment figure for you, that consistent, trustworthy mirror that will see you and give you a true reflection of yourself back to you. And let me tell you what I see. I see a precious little boy that is not perfect, but good. I see the good, bad, and the ugly, but I see a net good when I see you, Graham. And I am so pleased with you. And I need to apologize that I have neglected you and I have believed you weren't enough as well. And I see the error of my ways and I am so sorry. And that is all changing right now, because from here on out, I'm making you my priority because you are my priority and your feelings matter so much to me, and I will validate every one of them. And I am delighted to meet your needs because your needs matter as well. And I'm here to stay. And little Graham, you belong to me. You belong to me. And I am so proud that you belong to me and you have won my approval, not because what you do, but because who you are on the inside. And I see that. And you won my approval the day you were born, actually. You will not lose it ever. You will have it until the day you leave this earth. Because you matter and you are precious to me. And I'm not going anywhere from here on out.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Whether you're a longtime or first-time listener to Behavioral Health Today, you're probably familiar with Triad, the company that brings you this podcast. But you may not know that Triad also hosts a community for current and aspiring behavioral and mental health professionals, featuring trending content and education and career resources, all for free. If you are a behavioral or mental health professional, or you're studying to become one, join more than 80,000 people on Triad by claiming your free professional account today. Visit us at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT and join the Triad community today.
Well, that's a beautiful exchange. You know, that's a very heartfelt exchange. I like the sequence of what you're doing here. You're validating my experience. You're seeing it, you're validating it, and then you normalize it within the context of my development, my family of origin. You say, this is why that makes sense. You're saying this is real. It makes sense. Here's its origin. Here's why it would be here. No, it's not a surprise that you do feel this. In fact, I probably feel surprised if you didn't feel it, at times. And then I like this idea that, psychodynamically, we talk about corrective emotional experiences, being that corrective other in someone's life who, let's say, their caregiver of origin, is able to show up and get it and understand and provide that person with the beginning of something vitally important where they feel like, wait a minute, I am important. I can be seen. I am visible. I do matter. I do have
Yeah.
worth. I do have value, because I've been
Yeah.
holding that maybe I am invisible and I question whether or not I matter.
Yeah.
And so this corrective emotional experience that you're creating here, maybe for the very first time, while you validate and normalize that I feel this way, and you make sense of it for me. And then I get to kind of depersonalize it. It's not about me. No. And in our relationship, I see your value, I see your worth, and I want to convey that. I can see that even then being something that if I can experience this in relationship with you in my, in therapy as a start, let's say, I could see where this could then be with some courage and with some help from you as my therapist to generalize this maybe more into my other relationships in my life, maybe my significant other, maybe a close friend, maybe something at work where I can begin to
Yeah.
generalize this. Tell me about that process, the generalization.
Yeah, that is powerful. So when that shame is removed, and I find that these exercises need to be repeated with different imprinting memories. So it might be that this was the 9-year-old Graham's shame template, but maybe he was bullied at school another time. And so we need to go and root out that shame that came from that. But once we start removing that shame,
Right.
people, they're able to now have this objectivity that when someone is like gaslighting them or insinuating that they're shameful or mocking them in some way, at other times, they're able to like go, oh, I see what's going on. I'm not the shameful one here.
Right.
You're the one doing the shameful behavior. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like they become just so powerful. They're almost like shame proof in a way.
Yeah.
And they're able to see things clearly.
Yeah, it's really good. There's a poem that says, "There's a hole in my sidewalk," in 5 short chapters. And it talks about the very things you're talking about here, where I'm walking down the street and there's a hole in my sidewalk and I fall into it. I don't know what it is. Let's call it shame. And it takes me forever to get out, but I do at some point. Next day, I'm walking down the street. There's a hole in my sidewalk and I still fall in, but I kind of recognize where I'm at. I get out faster. And then the next day I walk down the street. There's a hole in my sidewalk. I see the hole. I still fall in because it's a habit, but I get out faster now. 4th day, I walk down the street, see the hole in my sidewalk, and I walk around it. The next day, I walk down the same street, see the hole, but I take a different street. So the idea here is the hole being our shame, if you will, being able to recognize it, be cognizant of it, put a different ending on it, and to not personalize it in the same way that we can be reactive to it.
Well, on the somatic level, I think it's much faster than that. I think it's like, I used to fall in that hole and man, I see that hole and I'm putting up barriers around it now and I will never fall in that hole again. It flips so quickly. That's been my experience. And somatically, when we feel shame, especially in our gut, and that is the majority of where people feel it, what happens when we exercise it, literally like remove it, now in our gut, instead of feeling shame when we're dealing with snaky people who want to deflect their shame onto us, what I see clients feel and what I myself feel is we'll feel disgust in our gut. And disgust, I believe shame is a type of self-disgust.
Yes.
But now we're not feeling self-disgust like that person wants us to feel. We're feeling disgust with that person. And that's that clarity where it's just like a new day.
Yeah. What you're raising there is a reminder that not only does the interaction affect us in our cognition about that being a shame moment, but it gets woven into the fabric of our body. Van der Kolk talks about the body holds the score, body holds the trauma. Same thing you're talking about here. Somatically, we hold this and we have to exorcise it, if you will. It has to be let out. Give us some success stories here. What are you seeing take place when you walk people through this? You join them, really, it sounds like, in walking down into this. What are you experiencing?
Oh, yeah, it is such a privilege. I have one client I like to brag about. I think I bragged about her on our earlier interview as well, that she was, as far as mental health syndromes and symptoms, she had psychosis and it was very severe. She has been free of all symptoms of everything. And she is completely off all medication. She is doing so well. And she is able to see things clearly, that she's not the shameful one. And she had to just completely separate from her family of origin. And
Yes.
she sees now that they are the shameful ones. They're the ones who
Yes.
acted shamefully with her. And it's so encouraging to see that. I mean, she didn't think
Mhm.
she could ever have children because the drugs for the psychosis wasn't, allowing her to conceive. And she's just gained her entire life back. It is so, so encouraging. With my daughter, I made amends with her for the shame I inflicted on her when I fell into a depression 15 years ago when she was little. And when I was able to tell her that was 100% a mom problem, when
Yeah.
you felt that shame, that was my shame, not your shame. And since then, all her symptoms of just chronic headaches and digestive tract disorders have completely evaporated. I mean, she doesn't have any headaches, any GI tract issues. She was having them for 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. You're reminding us of a stat that I read once. I'm not sure the number still, but I would imagine it's probably even higher. 68% of our presenting problems when we go to see our internist or a private, physician, MD, typically have a mental health related disorder attached to it. And yet we're treating symptoms and other things. And I admire and appreciate your vulnerability and your transparency and disclosure in your own life and how this can affect those around us. And I think what you're encouraging too, and I said it in our introduction, that you're understanding that our pathology, whether it's, a mood disorder, a thought disorder, anxiety disorder, even down to, to a place of psychosis, like the patient you're talking about, those have a real key piece in anger and shame, don't they? It's how and who we see ourselves as being in the environment which created this. And sometimes,
Yeah.
healthy people need to leave unhealthy relationships. It's just what happens, because if we do not, then it keeps those shame-based, anger-based, internalized feelings of who we are alive. And we're only
Yes.
going to be as good as those continue to play out in our lives until we remove ourselves and we process them the way that you're describing.
Yes, because people who, we call toxic, how they work is they deflect the shame they feel that
Mhm.
they don't want to feel onto us. That
That's
is
right.
how they work. And so
That's
if
right.
we continue to have those people in our lives, but the flip side is after we do this work for ourselves and we become shame proof, those people actually no longer want to be in our lives. We don't even have to have the boundaries because all we have to do is say, oh, I see what you're doing right now. Like you're
Yeah.
wanting me to believe I'm the problem, to deflect from the fact that you're the problem. And the minute we give them a mirror, we are a mirror for them. We give them a true reflection of
Yeah.
themselves. They actually don't want to ever interact with us again. That's too scary. That's too frightening for them.
Yeah, it's really good. The mirror we hold back up is too much exposing of them to them.
Yeah.
And they have to, it's that old saying, when you shine the light on something, it has to disappear. It can't be held up to the light. I know sometimes as practitioners that we kind of get to help those around us, even, our friends sometimes, even though we're not doing therapy with them, we can extend to them some of the things that we do in just kind of a short order. And have you ever found yourself being able to do that?
Yes, I want to share about something recent actually. So I have a really good friend. She and her husband are, moving towards divorce. They're still living together right now. And she had me over for dinner just last week. And I thought this is going to be awkward because he's going to be there too. And, how's this going to go? He was there. I like him. I know, she's had a lot of issues with him, but he had lost a lot of weight. He was already a pretty slender guy. And I asked him, I said, hey, Mike, what's going on? You look like you've lost a lot of weight. And he's like, yeah, I have a lot of gut issues. And I thought that's a shame, right? Because she's ending the marriage. And
Right.
a lot of men, like they feel like they're the ones who failed. They see a divorce as I failed. I'm a failure. And so I knew that right then and there. So we sit down, we're eating, and I just kind of bring up, what I shared with you earlier about the difference between men and women, how boys are conditioned to believe vulnerability is shameful. And then they carry that through their lives, and how when they're married later and the wife is saying, this is how my feelings are hurt, all they hear is, you suck, you suck, you suck. And I was saying that, and I knew that had been my girlfriend's experience with him. And he's sitting right there. He doesn't know I know all this, right? And he looks at me and he goes, how do you remedy that?
Mm.
And I thought, okay, he's interested. That's a good sign. So I said, Mike, can we remedy that right now? Are you open to that? Are you open to me leading you in a little exercise? He goes, yeah. And he basically told me that growing up, his dad called him a pussy when he cried. And so he was able just to tell me, like, I asked him, just find one, memory of that happening that just is most salient, that just comes right to the forefront. And he said, oh yeah, when I was 6, my dad was fixing something and he accidentally bonked me in the face when he was like moving his equipment, and I started crying and he called me a pussy. So I had him close his eyes and I had him see little Mike. And then I led him in a integration exercise, kind of like what we did before, but with the shame. I said, I had his adult Mike say to little Mike, I want you to put all that shame right now in a big cardboard box. And we're going to just return to owner here. We're going to give it right back to our dad and say, hey, Dad, this actually belongs to you, not me. It was never mine to begin with. When you call me a pussy, this is your shame. So I'm returning it to owner. Do with it what you will. It's on you, but it's not mine, because you know what? I'm proud that I have these feelings, and crying is a natural human response to being hurt. And there's no shame in that. And so I led him in that. It just took all of 2 minutes. And afterwards, he was like, wow, thank you. And I said, how do you feel in your gut? And he goes, at ease. And so I knew like something's really shifted for him. It was really powerful.
That's a lovely story. I love when we can just take a couple of minutes and deposit something into someone's life just like that can be so transformative and right at the heart or right at the gut of where this issue is that people don't understand and see. And the development of these things is kind of a subtle, nuanced development over time. Shame is not like, bam, it can be, but for the most part, it's just like a piece of paper on top of another piece of paper, just layer after layer after layer. Before you know, you got a whole ream of shame, but you don't know it's there because it's just subtly, developed over time. But what a nice experience to give him, and maybe a shift, and it'd be interesting to kind of watch and track that and say, hey, how's your gut doing, down the road, and see what's happening around those issues. I love the story, and I appreciate the one with your sharing with your patient as well, going from the psychotic state or psychosis to discovering her intended and designed self, who she really was when that lie is removed.
Yes.
And here she is in her beauty and herself.
Yeah.
Bronwyn, as we're kind of winding down for today, I would love our listeners to have a takeaway or maybe an initial step that they might take in implementing, maybe even something around this exercise of shame today in their lives. What could they do as a takeaway from our time together?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone listening to just let yourself feel in your body where shame shows up when it's triggered, because we all do get triggered with it. Let it lead you back to an imprinting memory, and then just engage yourself in the exercise. Give that shame, put it in a cardboard box, return to owner. It doesn't mean your parent is inherently evil. It just means what they did in that act, whether intentional or not, was a shameful act, and that's different. And we don't have to feel guilt returning it to owner.
Really good. Really good. I love that. Well, as we close, I would love our listeners to learn more about you and your work, including your podcast, Angry at the Right Things. How can they do so?
They can just look up Angry at the Right Things and subscribe. I know I'll also be doing the Summit series for you guys, I believe in February. So I'll talk a lot more about all this then as well, and some of the exercises.
Outstanding. We're looking forward to having you back during the Summit series. We're going to be preparing for that, and that's going to be a really exciting time. So we will look forward again to having you back on that. Well, for today, Bronwyn, it's always great to have you with us. Thanks for being a return guest on the show today, and so appreciate our time together.
Thank you, Graham. Me too.
Also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Bronwyn and me today. It's always great to have you with us. And hey, by the way, we'd love to have you help us spread the word about this podcast to help us grow and to reach more people, allowing them to discover the valuable insights that get shared in this show. To help us out in this way, would you please leave us a review and share this podcast with a friend? Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.